In more than 20 years of studying and observing relationships, I have seen avoidant people walk away from connections that others would have considered incredibly valuable. I have watched them distance themselves from partners who were kind, patient, emotionally available, and deeply committed. People who gave them room when they needed it. People who understood their need for independence. People who did not constantly pursue them or demand reassurance. People who offered a calm, consistent kind of love that many spend years hoping to find. And yet, I have also seen something fascinating happen. Those same avoidants who appeared impossible to reach, who seemed completely comfortable living behind emotional walls, sometimes encounter a very different kind of person. And when they do, something shifts. It does not always lead to a perfect relationship. It does not always result in a happy ending. Sometimes, the connection still becomes complicated, painful, or unfinished. But the impact can be much deeper than what the avoidant experienced with anyone else. It can reach places that their usual defenses were built specifically to protect. That is the kind of person I want to talk about today. And if you are listening to this, there is a chance that person may be you. The empath who affects an avoidant most deeply is usually not the person who loves them the hardest. It is not necessarily the person who has endless patience, constantly adjusts, keeps forgiving, or repeatedly changes themselves to make the avoidant feel comfortable. Those qualities can be beautiful, but when they become excessive, they can actually activate the avoidant's instinct to retreat instead of making them feel safe enough to come closer. Why? Because underneath avoidant behavior, there is often a deep sensitivity to emotional dependency. When they sense that another person needs them emotionally in a way they do not know how to handle, their nervous system can interpret that closeness as pressure. Even genuine love can feel threatening when it arrives with visible emotional dependence attached to it. Someone may love them sincerely. They may have nothing but good intentions. They may simply want closeness, reassurance, consistency, and emotional connection. But to an avoidant who has learned to protect themselves through distance, intense emotional need can still feel like an obligation they are expected to fulfill. That is why the empath who reaches an avoidant on the deepest level is often a very different kind of empath. This person has what I would call emotional sovereignty. They feel deeply. Sometimes they feel things other people barely notice. They can pick up on subtle changes in tone, energy, behavior, and emotional atmosphere. Their sensitivity can be almost extraordinary. They notice what is left unsaid. They recognize emotional shifts before they are explained. But there is one crucial difference. They are not controlled by what they feel. They can experience enormous love without losing themselves inside it. They can miss someone without abandoning their own life. They can care deeply without making another person's behavior responsible for their emotional stability. And that usually comes from a great deal of inner work. They have experienced pain. They have confronted disappointment. They have spent time alone with uncomfortable emotions instead of constantly running from them. They have explored their own wounds, faced parts of themselves they did not want to see, and slowly learned how to return to their own center. At some point, their sensitivity stopped being something that controlled them. It became one of their greatest strengths. This person genuinely wants the avoidant. There is no pretending otherwise. Their feelings are real. Their affection is sincere. Their connection is meaningful to them. But they do not need the avoidant to validate their worth or stabilize their emotions. They can say, "I love you," while still knowing, "I will be okay if you cannot love me in the way I need." They can remain open without becoming dependent. They can offer warmth without chasing. They can understand someone's fear without making that fear an excuse for endless emotional neglect. And that combination creates something the avoidant defense system is not accustomed to handling. Think about how the usual withdrawal pattern works. It is most effective when the other person becomes visibly distressed by the distance. When the avoidant pulls away and the partner becomes anxious, starts questioning everything, sends more messages, asks for reassurance, or desperately tries to restore the connection, the avoidant receives confirmation that closeness creates pressure. The more they withdraw, the more the other person pursues. The more the other person pursues, the more trapped the avoidant feels. And the more trapped they feel, the stronger their urge to disappear becomes. That cycle reinforces itself. But emotionally sovereign empathy changes the entire dynamic. When the avoidant pulls back, this person notices it. They feel it. It may hurt. They may even spend time wondering what changed. But they do not collapse. They do not immediately chase. They do not beg someone to choose them. They do not turn their emotional pain into endless attempts to force closeness. They allow the feeling to exist without allowing it to dictate their behavior. And that is where something unexpected can happen. For perhaps the first time, the avoidant is no longer dealing with someone they can push away and automatically pull back toward them through distance. The person remains emotionally present, but they are not emotionally dependent. They can say, in essence, "I care about you, but I will not abandon myself to keep you close." That message can be incredibly powerful, because now the avoidant is confronted with something they may not have experienced before: intimacy without emotional captivity. There is no desperate demand. There is no attempt to control them. There is no performance designed to earn their affection. There is simply a person who sees them clearly, feels deeply, loves sincerely, and still possesses a complete sense of self. And that is often where avoidance begins to encounter its own reflection. The avoidant can no longer explain the connection simply by saying, "They need too much from me," because this person does not. They can no longer convince themselves that closeness automatically means losing their freedom, because this person has their own freedom. And they can no longer dismiss the connection as merely emotional pressure when the other person is capable of standing firmly on their own. The paradox is that the less this person needs the avoidant to regulate their emotional world, the more space the avoidant may finally have to recognize what they actually feel. That does not mean every avoidant will suddenly become secure. It does not mean emotional sovereignty magically transforms someone who refuses to confront their patterns. But it can create a level of psychological impact that ordinary pursuit never could. Because this kind of empath does not fight the avoidance walls. They simply stop standing outside those walls, begging for the door to open. And sometimes that is precisely what makes the avoidant look back. Not because they were manipulated, not because someone played a game, but because they encountered a person who could love them deeply without losing themselves in the process. That kind of person is difficult to forget. And when an avoidant finally realizes what they experienced, the realization can reach much deeper than simple attraction. They may begin to understand that the person they walked away from was never trying to trap them. They were offering connection, and the person who seemed the least desperate for their love may become the person whose absence they feel most intensely. When an avoidant creates distance and the other person immediately moves closer, the familiar pattern begins. The more the avoidant retreats, the more the other person tries to reconnect. And the more they reach, the more the avoidant feels the urge to escape. Before long, both people are caught inside a cycle that becomes increasingly painful and predictable, especially for anyone who has experienced an avoidant relationship firsthand. But the emotionally sovereign empath responds differently. When the avoidant steps back, they do not immediately follow. That does not mean the distance goes unnoticed. In fact, They may feel it more deeply than almost anyone else. They notice the change in energy. They sense the silence. They recognize when warmth suddenly becomes detachment. But instead of turning that discomfort into pursuit, they turn inward. They return to themselves. They process what they are feeling instead of immediately asking the other person to make the feeling disappear. They find ways to ground themselves, restore their emotional balance, and reconnect with the parts of their life that exist independently of the relationship. Most importantly, they have developed a deep understanding that their worth does not rise and fall according to someone else's availability. If the avoidant is present, they appreciate the connection. If the avoidant needs space, they can give it. But their sense of identity remains intact either way. And this is where something fascinating happens. When an avoidant withdraws and is met with calm rather than pursuit, their usual emotional pattern suddenly has nothing to work against. There is no desperate message waiting for them, no emotional confrontation demanding an immediate explanation, no frantic attempt to restore closeness, no visible desperation that allows them to feel safely distant while knowing the other person is still waiting. Instead, there is silence. Not coldness, not punishment, not a calculated attempt to make them jealous or uncomfortable, just stillness. The other person remains grounded in themselves. And that can be incredibly unsettling for someone whose defenses depend on creating intimacy whenever intimacy starts feeling overwhelming. They are used to believing that pulling away will create more space. But this time, their withdrawal does not produce the usual reaction. There is nothing to resist, nothing to escape from, nothing demanding that they return. And suddenly, the avoidant may find themselves confronted with an uncomfortable question. What do I actually feel when nobody is chasing me? Because when there is no pursuit, they can no longer use the other person's emotional reaction as evidence that closeness is dangerous. They are left alone with their own internal experience. And that can bring feelings to the surface that were much easier to avoid when someone else was constantly reaching for them. This is why I want to be very specific about what makes this particular kind of empath different. It is not simply that they are patient. It is not simply that they are emotionally intelligent. And it is certainly not because they know some secret strategy for making an avoidant chase them. Their difference shows up in the way they see the person in front of them. This empath does not fall in love with an imaginary version of the avoidant. They do not become attached to who they believe that person could eventually become if they would only heal, communicate better, or finally understand their own wounds. They see the real person. They see the warmth. They see the emotional intelligence. They see the moments when the connection feels incredibly genuine. But they also see the contradictions. They see the sudden withdrawal. They notice the emotional deflection. They recognize the inconsistency. They understand that someone can care deeply and still struggle to remain emotionally available. And they do not need to deny any of those realities in order to preserve their feelings. That is an important distinction. Many people become trapped because they alternate between idealizing the avoidant and resenting them. One day they think, this person is incredible. I have never connected with anyone like this. Then the avoidant withdraws, and the story completely changes. Now they think, this person is selfish. They never cared. Everything was fake. The emotionally sovereign empath does neither. They can hold two truths at the same time. They can recognize the genuine beauty in the connection while also acknowledging the genuine limitations of the person. They can say, I know you care about me, and I also know that you struggle to show up consistently. They can recognize someone's wounds without making those wounds their responsibility. They can have compassion without becoming an emotional rescuer. They can understand someone's fear without allowing that fear to repeatedly hurt them. That combination creates something extraordinarily rare, compassionate clarity. And for an avoidant person, being experienced through that kind of clarity can feel completely unfamiliar. Because many avoidants spend their relationships moving between two experiences. At first, they may be idealized. Someone sees the best in them, focuses on their potential, overlooks their inconsistencies, and creates an image of them that may be more beautiful than reality. But eventually, when the emotional distance becomes too painful, idealization can turn into resentment. The same person who once seemed perfect suddenly becomes the person who is blamed for everything. The avoidant is either placed on a pedestal or pushed onto the other side of the emotional battlefield. But the sovereign empath does something different. They see the whole picture. They can appreciate the good without exaggerating it. They can acknowledge the difficult parts without weaponizing them. They do not need the avoidant to be perfect in order to love them. And they do not need to hate them in order to protect themselves. They simply see, clearly, quietly, without illusion. And there is something profoundly powerful about being truly seen by someone who is not trying to control you. The avoidant may be accustomed to people either pursuing them because they desperately want closeness, or eventually attacking them because the distance has become unbearable. But this person does neither. They are capable of looking directly at the avoidant's strengths, wounds, contradictions, and limitations, and saying, in essence, I see you as you are. I care about you. But I will not lose myself trying to convince you to become someone you are not ready to be. That kind of clarity can reach places that pressure never could. Because there is no judgment to fight against. There is no fantasy to live up to. There is no emotional cage to escape. There is simply another human being who sees them accurately and still chooses to remain compassionate. And sometimes that experience becomes unforgettable. Not because the empath tried to make themselves impossible to forget, but because they offered something the avoidant rarely experiences. To be deeply understood without being controlled. To be loved without being possessed. And to be seen without being condemned. There is something deeply unsettling about being understood completely by someone who does not judge you and still chooses to remain kind. For an avoidant person, that experience can challenge the very reason their emotional walls exist in the first place. Those walls were created for protection. They were meant to defend against people who might demand too much, become emotionally overwhelming, or eventually turn their frustration into anger and rejection. But what happens when the person standing in front of that wall does none of those things? What happens when they see the avoidant clearly, recognize the fear, the contradictions, the distance, and the emotional limitations, yet respond with calmness rather than punishment? Suddenly, the wall has nothing left to defend against. And there is another quality of the sovereign empath that may be even more powerful. They do not make it their mission to repair the avoidant. That may sound obvious, but it is actually one of the hardest things for someone who loves deeply to practice. Many people believe they are giving an avoidant space, but somewhere underneath that patience is an expectation. They are thinking, if I am patient enough, eventually they will trust me. If I love them consistently enough, eventually they will open up. If I understand their wounds enough, eventually they will become emotionally available. If I give them enough time, they will finally become the partner I know they are capable of being. The person may never say these things aloud. They may not even consciously realize they are carrying these expectations. But the avoidant can often sense them. They can feel when someone's acceptance comes with an invisible condition attached. It may look like unconditional love on the surface, but underneath it is still saying, I accept you for now, because I believe you will eventually change. And to an avoidant, that can still feel like pressure. The sovereign empath operates differently. They do not love the avoidant as a project. They do not see themselves as the person who will finally heal them. They do not measure their patience by how quickly the avoidant eventually becomes vulnerable. Their acceptance is genuine. If the avoidant opens up, they receive it. If the avoidant needs space, they respect it. If the avoidant struggles with intimacy, they understand that struggle without taking responsibility for solving it. Their presence is not a waiting room where they sit patiently until the avoidant finally becomes the person they hoped for. They are simply present, and that presence is freely given. There is no hidden contract, no emotional debt, no silent message saying, "After everything I have done for you, you owe me closeness." No expectation that their love must eventually produce a particular result. That kind of freedom can be profoundly unfamiliar to an avoidant, because many of their experiences with closeness have taught them that affection eventually comes with demands. Someone gives and then expects. Someone understands and later reminds them how much they sacrificed. Someone says they accept them, but secretly hopes to change them. So when they encounter someone whose presence carries no hidden agenda, their usual defenses can become confused. There is nothing to negotiate, nothing to prove, nothing to escape from, nothing they have to give back simply because someone cared for them. And that is why this kind of connection can reach the avoidant at a level that words often cannot. They may not be able to explain what feels different. They may not suddenly become emotionally expressive. They may not even understand why this particular person stays in their thoughts long after the relationship has changed. But something inside them has registered the experience. Someone saw them without creating a fantasy around them. Someone understood their limitations without humiliating them for having those limitations. Someone cared without trying to possess them. Someone gave them freedom without becoming emotionally absent. And once a person has experienced that kind of connection, it can be very difficult to completely erase it from their emotional memory. Because beneath all the defenses, most people want to experience something simple. To be known and still accepted. Not idealized, not rescued, not controlled, not criticized into becoming better. Simply known. The sovereign empath offers exactly that. And that is what makes their impact so profound. They do not bring the avoidant to their knees by chasing them. They do not manipulate them through silence. They do not create jealousy. They do not use distance as a weapon. Their impact comes from something much quieter. They remain deeply themselves. They love without disappearing into the relationship. They feel without becoming consumed by those feelings. They understand without excusing everything. They stay compassionate without abandoning their standards. And if they eventually walk away, they do so because they recognize that loving someone cannot require sacrificing themselves. That is the empath who can leave the deepest imprint on an avoidant. And if you have recognized yourself in what I have described, the sensitivity, the emotional depth, the ability to understand what others cannot always see, the compassion that exists alongside strong inner boundaries, then there is something I want you to hear clearly. You were never too much. Your capacity to feel deeply was never the problem. Your emotional intensity was not a flaw simply because someone else could not meet it. Your ability to love wholeheartedly was not something you needed to shrink. You did not need to become colder, quieter, less caring, or less emotionally alive just to make another person comfortable. You were carrying something powerful. The issue was never that you had too much depth. The issue was that the person standing across from you may not yet have developed the emotional capacity to meet you at that depth. And that distinction matters. Because when someone cannot meet you, the answer is not always to become smaller. Sometimes, the answer is to stop questioning the size of your heart and start recognizing the importance of giving that heart to someone who has the capacity to hold it.